But I'll tell you what is serious, and it's super serious. It's a super league, super serious super league. In case you missed it, a bunch of European football teams announced this mid-season competition called the Super League. And for those of you who are, mostly into American sports, not necessarily into European sports, this is going to be directed mostly at you, so I can help you kind of understand what's going on and why people are damning the Super League so severely. Because from a casual perspective, you think, oh man, all of these really big name teams are forming a competition. That sounds fantastic. But once you dig into the meat and the bones of what the Super League actually is, it's absolutely horrific for the sport of European football, and it's bad for all sports in general. And there's a lot of differences between American and European sports that play into this that I'm going to try and compare and contrast to make the level of understanding a little bit better. Because for me, myself, like I said, I saw all this ginormous Super League form earlier this week, and I'm like, wow, that's actually kind of cool. But me being a casual fan, I didn't understand everything that went into it. And it wasn't until I started doing research, because this is actually the first time that I'm talking about European football on, this show. It wasn't until I did my research that I realized how horrific this is for sports. And I always, plan on doing my research. I always make it a priority to do my research because I don't want to go in and start talking about something that I don't, know what I'm talking about. I don't want to talk out of my area in which the sun don't shine, if you catch my drift. We're kind of trying to keep it PG. I don't like talking out of my butt. I like to know what I'm talking about. I don't want to act like I'm talking about when I really have no idea. So I was doing my research for this, and this Super League is bad news, ladies and gentlemen. It's bad news, and I'll try and explain why. So this Super League is consisting of teams from multiple different leagues, multiple different countries, England, Italy, and Spain. And there are hoping to be more founders in this league. The league is hoping for at least 20 teams to be founders of the inaugural season of this league. But the teams that were announced as being the initial founders were Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool, Manchester City, Manchester United, Tottenham, I hope I pronounced that right, along with 3 teams from Italy, AC Milan, Inter Milan, and Juventus, and then 3 more teams from Spain, Atletico Madrid, Barcelona, and Real Madrid. And again, those are the initial members. Those are the quote-unquote elite teams in European football, which is kind of ironic considering that a lot of these teams are not necessarily elite at the moment. They haven't been elite for a while, and they're really just the most popular teams. And that's part of the reason why people are so outraged by that, is that who says that these teams are without a doubt the best teams in European football at the moment? They do. But nobody else continues to think so. So it's really more of like a popularity contest. It feels more like a voting for a class president in 5th grade than it does feeling like forming of a very balanced and competitive Super League. Because some of these teams aren't not that good right now. Let's be frank about it. But yeah, these are the founding members. They're looking to add at least 20. They're 20 in total teams before this whole thing starts. And a lot of people are very pissed off and angry about this. Fans are angry, players are angry, teams are angry. Everybody's angry except for those teams involved. The UEFA president is angry. Everybody's so pissed off at this. And some people are calling it the Americanization of European football. And there are qualities of Americanization and franchisement in this Super League, but they're doing it horrifically wrong. Start to begin to understand why this is so horrible for the sport. I think the place to start is to understand that European sports and American sports are different in terms of what they mean to the culture of our countries. American sports are all franchised. American sports are, a select number of teams in select different markets, and there are no local roots for our sports. We're not locally invested in our sporting teams, at least for the most part. We'll root for the closest team, or we'll root for the team that we like the best. Maybe we like a certain player. There are no local historical roots for our football teams, for instance. I'm a Packers and a Miami Dolphins fan. I was born and raised in South Florida. The Dolphins just happen to be the team closest to me. I very well could have been a Tampa Bay fan. I could have been a Jacksonville Jaguars fan, but I was closest to Miami, so I, grew up and gravitated towards being a Dolphins fan. That's not the way that it is in Europe, especially primarily in, we'll just use England as an example. There are local roots, deep historical soccer history with a lot of these teams, and there is more invested. There's a lot of competition that the Super League is just throwing away by adding all the quote-unquote elite teams. And again, some of them are just popular team names, because I imagine, as I read off the list, even the casual soccer fan will say, I recognize a lot of those names. They're not necessarily the elite teams anymore. They are the popular teams, quote unquote. And so there's a lot of local competition that is being completely eliminated by the Super League, because the Super League is essentially claiming these are the best teams, nobody else can get in. It's like a closed club. It's a closed soccer club without even giving some of the little guys a chance to make it into that club. And essentially, it's a lot of greediness and money involved here, because a lot of these teams are financially the most financially stable. They have the most to spend. They have the most to buy players. They have the best talent. They have the money to go out and spend, and they earn billions and billions of dollars a year. These are the richest teams, and meanwhile, the other teams that may not be so rich are basically being hung out to dry. The rich get rich and the poor get poor, and it's eliminating all competition, because part of the fun and the tension of European soccer is seeing your local team rise up the ranks and, become, and developing players and becoming an elite team, whether you're a Division 1 team, Division 2, and ultimately the goal is the Premier League or the Champions League. Essentially, the Super League is wiping all of that competition out of the room. It's saying there's no competition. These are the best teams. These are the teams that get to compete, and they make all the money. Whereas the little guys, again, are not making anything. I hope I'm communicating that clear enough. I'm trying to make sure that I cover, dot all my I's and cross all my T's. And I apologize if this is coming off as a little bit haphazardly. It's going to be a longer segment. I'm just trying to make sure that I do my due diligence with this segment here to end the show. So there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of local history, hundreds and hundreds of years of local history that are being eliminated, and the competition is being completely eliminated because of the Super League. Now, what also appears to be the problem, and I'd like to compare this to what might happen in America, right? If this were happening in America, let's say it was happening with baseball, because baseball is mostly similar to soccer in terms of the development and the type of league that is. There's no salary cap in baseball, right? Teams can spend whatever they want within reason. There's a money cap just to make sure that the parity of the MLB is still viable. But obviously there are teams that spend more than others and have won more than others. So it would be like if the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Marlins, because you would want the Miami market, the Chicago Cubs, and the White Sox, because if you have one, you have both. The Dodgers, the Giants, and I'm thinking of like another AL team potentially. Regardless, so you take those best teams, the teams that spend the most money, and we'll throw the Padres in there too because they've been spending a lot of money recently. You take the teams with the most amount of money and say, okay, everybody else get out. We're forming our own little league. Everybody would be super pissed off, right? That's essentially what's happening over in Europe, to draw a little bit of a comparison. And of course, again, that doesn't happen in, basketball, football, hockey, because there is franchising in American sports. There are certain teams in certain markets, and you root for the one that you like the most or is closest to you. There isn't any local roots. There isn't as much investment as there is in European soccer. So you can understand why players are getting so pissed off, because, hey, the players are going to be looped into this specific group of Super League. They're talking about bans for players from world activities like with the World Cup. I'm talking about bans for the players that, play in the Super League. And it's completely damaging the competition of European football. And again, it's these select teams, and some of them aren't elite anymore, that are saying, we are the elite group, nobody else is allowed, we're going to make all the money. And again, it's so damaging, because with the franchising in American sports, there is a salary cap, and that causes the parity in like the NHL and the NFL, where a different team wins the Super Bowl almost every single year. There are precautions made in these franchise league to make sure that even the bottom half of the league is supported as much as possible. What this Super League is doing is making sure that the rich stay rich and the poor get poor, and there's no way that some of your local football teams, which again, there's a lot of competition and there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that gets poured into these teams to make them as profitable as possible. it's just completely throwing that away. And to have it happen coming out of a pandemic is also extremely, oh man, I want to use a bad word here, but I can't. It's a PG show. It's an extremely disgusting display. Because sure, some of these big elite teams might have been able to survive the COVID pandemic based on how much they bring in terms of merchandise and sales per year alone, because these are the quote unquote top teams. The little teams that have been ravaged by COVID, who haven't been able to make sales, who haven't had fans, who may not be as well known, who are barely struggling to get through because of what the coronavirus pandemic has done to the world of sports. To have this Super League formed fresh out of a pandemic that isn't even over yet, that's also something that's extremely disgusting. And the rich get rich and the poor get poorer. It's all about the money here. It's all about the money. These teams are getting richer. There's no competition. It would damage heavily the competition of European football. And it's really horrific and horrible to see. Hey folks, thank you so much for listening to this segment from the Hard-Headed Sports Podcast. If you enjoyed this segment, make sure that you drop a like on the video and a comment. It helps me out a bunch. And if you're interested in watching more segments like this from the show after the show has been completed, you should definitely subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you're interested in listening to the entire show in its full-length entirety, you should listen to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Anchor. Once again, thank you so much for watching the video. My name is Nick Ryan, and I will see you all again very soon.